So we are here at the High Point Barbershop, second location, Scott's Edition, with Mr. David Foster, heretofore referenced as Foster. This is the All Things Richmond Podcast. This podcast focuses on interesting people doing interesting things in Richmond. People have their finger on the pulse of Richmond. And I think at High Point Barbershop, you guys kind of define that, I think, the heartbeat of Richmond. So let's jump right into it. So, Mr. Foster, where did you grow up?
Mr. Duke. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania. I was born in Pottsville, which is the home of Yuengling Brewery, and I was raised in Wilkes-Barre, which is closest to Scranton, which most people would know as the home of The Office.
Sure, you Dunder Mifflin?
Michael Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my uncle.
Yeah.
Not really.
He likes paper like Michael Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you grew up in Pennsylvania, and somehow you found your way to Richmond. How did that happen, and when was that?
So I grew up in punk rock and hardcore music and skateboarding. And as I got older, I joined a few bands, and those bands had the opportunity to travel. And one of the places that we traveled to was Richmond, Virginia. We would play shows at Alley Cats, 929, Strange Matter, Nancy Reagan Twisters. And through that, I made friends with a group of guys and people in Richmond that were kind of into the same thing I was into. So as I got older and was ready to kind of spread my wings and get out of the valley of Pennsylvania, Richmond called to me.
Now it was 2006-ish?
Yeah, 2006. I actually moved from Los Angeles, tried that out for a year. It wasn't for me. I'm an East Coast guy. And my friends got me a job selling cell phones through a small franchise of like an authorized retailer for Verizon. So that brought me to Richmond.
Right. And so from 2006 to 2014, you sold cell phones. What else did you do in between getting to Richmond and starting the barbershop?
Tried to sell mortgages for 6 months. I took water testing. I was a field sampler for an environmental laboratory. And I did construction a little bit, I think, at one point. I bounced. I worked the door at New York Deli and Sticky Rice.
Nice.
And then I played in a band that toured full-time. I toured all over the world. I actually completely forgot about that. But 2008, I literally was gone. I had a house that I lived in on Elwood, but I was never home.
And what was the name of that band?
Blacklisted.
Blacklisted.
Yeah,
Okay.
Blacklisted.
Traveled all over the world? Europe, everywhere?
I went to Europe, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, all over the U.S. probably 3 times that year. So it was a busy year, and I was broke at the end of it.
So how does that background lead into starting a barbershop in 2014?
After that year of touring, actually, I had like a come to Jesus moment where I was like, what's next for me? I think around that time I was like maybe 24, 25. I had dropped out of college a few times. That just wasn't working for me. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to take that next step in life.
Right.
And I've always been a do-it-yourself kind of person. If I had a vision for something, I typically saw it through my own way. And one of the things, after making a list of things I enjoyed doing, which was a short list, one of the things I enjoyed doing was getting my hair cut. And I love the idea of an old family-run traditional barbershop. So I started to kind of bounce around the idea of being a barber, but even first, just owning a barbershop. I thought that was a cool thing. And in Richmond specifically, I couldn't find what I was visioning in my head. I couldn't find traditional but modern. It didn't seem to exist. And I scoured. I went everywhere. I was searching, and I couldn't find it. So then, after realizing that it seemed like there was that kind of void in Richmond, I pedaled to the metal all the way. How am I going to make this happen? So I started an apprenticeship at the West End at a barbershop called Parkside off Broad and Cox in Innsbruck.
Yeah. Robert. I know Robert.
Robert's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Robert's my mentor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that connection. That's interesting. I used to go back in the day. I went there for years back. On the West End.
So I worked at his original shop. Had the black and white floor next to the pizza shop.
Yep.
I was his apprentice, and he threw me straight into the fire. I didn't tell anyone I was an apprentice. He was like, "Just cut hair, don't say anything."
Right.
So I quit selling cell phones after I got busy enough doing that. And all along, and I actually told him when I first started, but I don't think he really listened to me. I said, I want to own a barbershop one day. Mind you, I couldn't even barely cut hair, so he was like, yeah, whatever you say. But, it went full speed ahead, and like most things in my life, like I was 150% committed. And then next thing you know, the business plan idea starts to come to fruition, and my best friend Darren became involved because he felt the vision too, because he couldn't find a place either.
Mm-hmm.
And I start to look around and say, okay, well, if him and I, who are, you know, in our late 20s, can't find anything, well, where's everyone else going?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's so we start to research, and we couldn't find it.
Yeah.
So we decided to build it ourselves.
Yeah. So how did the partnership with your other 3 partners come to be?
Well, exactly like I'd mentioned, Darren and I, you know, started figuring it out, literally wrote our business plan on the back of the napkin at Joe's Inn, like, yeah, we're going to have this and we're going to do this, but it's going to be super simple. We're going to listen to punk rock and we're going to serve coffee. And, you know, everything like made like really like cute sense,
Right.
but it didn't really make a bunch of financial sense. We were just
Right.
guessing, you know, off of what experiences that I had
Right.
through the beginnings of my apprenticeship. So, literally by chance, I met, and our biggest obstacle was that I didn't know any other younger barbers. All the barbers I knew were, you know, in their 40s and 50s, in the twilight of their career, on their way down, or just didn't really mesh with the vision of what the shop had. So I couldn't find another barber. One day I get a phone call from somebody, and he had a really funny accent, and he goes, David Foster, my name is Jackie Flav, and I'm a licensed barber from Portland, and I want to meet you. And I was like, what's up with this guy's voice? But we ended up meeting. He saw my business card at Lamplighter, which is, you know, another small business in the city. And he was looking for work too as a barber, and he couldn't find anything. And he had a friend that was, their situation was very similar to Darren's and mine, where they had a business plan written, they had the vision, they couldn't find it, but they didn't know the right people, and they also weren't originally from Richmond, so there was some like rooted networking that they didn't really have like really tight. And so we got together and met, and it was kind of like, you know, really exciting and then also scary, because I was like, well, these guys have like a real business plan.
Right.
They have like, you know, projections and stuff.
Numbers.
No, they were like, oh, well, if we do this, we'll do this. And then, you know, we have a budget in place. And, you know, I was like, well, I'm going to have to sell everything I own to open this barbershop.
Right.
Another side note, I'm like a psycho sneaker collector.
Right.
So I was like, well, I'm going to have to sell all my Jordans and Air Maxes and, you know, hopefully I make a couple $1,000s, you know?
Right.
But these guys had it all figured out, at least, you know, on the surface.
Right.
So after like probably 9 months of each of us kind of courting each other, we both kind of settled down and said, you know what, like, why don't we just do this together? And, you know, we don't need to open 2 barbershops that will rival each other in the city. Like, my goal with barbering and opening a barbershop wasn't to become a millionaire. My goal was to create a community space that I could spend my time in and be happy there, make enough money to make a living, but be able to be myself, let other people's be themselves,
Sure.
And, you know, ingrain myself in the city that I've turned into my home. So I wasn't really concerned with, well, you know, we're going to have too many partners and the pie's going to get sliced too thin. Like, that wasn't a thing for me. And they kind of felt the same way, because Darren and I had a vision, and we have like the creative juice, I guess you could say. And they had the reality juice, which is, you know, the financial background, the business vision, the get it done vision.
Sure.
And we're just like flying by the seat of our pants.
Sure. Yeah. So how did I guess if you call it a pop-up shop at Shaco Denim, that was like a way to kind of test your model to see if there was legs.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I was approached by one of the guys that worked at Shaco. His name is Robert Nolly. He still works there, and he said, hey, you know, we're really trying to focus on our space, and we have this idea to get a barber in here. Is this something that you would do? And I was all about doing it. Unfortunately, I was still an apprentice at Parkside. And the way that it works as an apprenticeship is you can't work without a license unless you have a barber to kind of hold your hand and be beside you. You know what I mean? And also, I just wasn't prepared to do that at the time. I still was figuring out the trade for myself. I wasn't ready to go out on my own. But Jack, the guy with the funny voice I was telling you about earlier, he was having a really hard time finding a place in Richmond to cut hair at that he was comfortable in. And I approached him and I was like, Jack, would you consider cutting down there by yourself? This could give us the opportunity to kind of build our brand. Like, basically put your toes in the water, see if people are receptive to it.
Right.
And he was all in. He was down. So he started that in the fall of 2013, actually. So that was almost a year before our actual brick and mortar
Shop
opened. So he worked there by himself for, I think, 6 to 7 months.
Right.
But that allowed us to get our website launched, get our branding launched, put up advertising at the shop on Meadow Street once we actually signed the lease. So we were able to kind of do this grassroots, buzz build up.
Right.
And have something behind it, not just a bunch of pictures and words. We actually say, well, book an appointment with Jack right now. Our brick and mortar coming soon. You know? So he was able to become the advocate for the business while I was still out in the West End grinding. Elliot was working at a salon on Main Street, Nirvana. And, Brian and Darren were both, pounding the pavement, getting ready for the shop to be built. So Darren was doing the design work with Campfire and Company. Brian was getting all the financing together, all the stuff that us as barbers couldn't do because we literally had our hands in people's heads.
Yeah. So from the outside looking in, when you guys opened on Meadow there in the Fan in 2014, from the outside looking in, it appeared that you guys had this like perfect blend of culture and vibe and like craftsmanship and like fun and I feel like it just took off really fast. Like there was a stretch where you couldn't like read BizSense or RTD or get on Facebook without seeing something about High Point. You guys got featured in some video, some TV show even. Like just how much of that was like intentional where you thought about very tactfully thought about your social media strategy and PR strategy, and how much of it was just an accident, right time, right place, or right bunch of people?
I think it was just like the perfect mix of all those things. Everything that we do is very calculated as far as like PR and social media goes. The truth of the matter is we don't have an advertising budget. We don't advertise. We never have. The only time that we've ever advertised was ahead of opening our shop and then thanking people for voting us best barbershop in local publications. But we've never taken out an ad. We've never had a billboard. We've never had a radio spot or anything like that. I think we were able to, I think the electricity of the opening of the shop was able to generate enough excitement and wavelengths through the city that just carried itself into other outlets such as the RTD articles or Style Weekly or RVA Magazine and it was just balancing that stuff. And actually when we first opened, our biggest problem was that we were too booked. I remember the first week we were open, day one, we were like, man, it would be great if we could cut like 25 heads today. That would be amazing. Like each of us doing 6 cuts, like we'd be good. And I think that day we did like 75 and then maybe a little bit less. But then the phones were ringing and then the next day booked in advance and then like 3 days booked in advance. And then within a month of us being open, we were booked about a month in advance. And we were overwhelmed actually. And that was our biggest problem is we got too busy too fast. So within the first year, we actually ended up adding a 5th station into the shop because we opened with 4 chairs. We added a 5th station and brought on another full-time barber. And then, it's just that filled up again. And then after a year and a half, it was like, we have to open another shop. Because we try not to pay too much attention to, the review services like Google and Yelp. Because everybody can say whatever they want to behind a name, but the biggest complaint that people were having was that they couldn't get in. They couldn't book an appointment. They were mad that we took appointments, or that was the word on the street. And I meet somebody. And
nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Yeah, it's too crowded. I can never get in. Like it's not worth it. Like I can't do that. Like who books their appointments a month in advance? And we're like, well, actually, like 3,000 people do. But. We had to figure it out.
Sure. So opened the first location 2014, the second location roughly 3 years later. You guys opened up here in June of 2017.
We opened here almost a year ago today, not almost a year ago, about a month off, but June of 2017.
That location has 5 stations here. You've got, 8?
We have 8 stations here,
8. Yeah. And we were talking before off camera, and we talked about how you guys are very careful when hiring to get the right people, to protect the culture at all times. Tell me why that's important to you, and tell me how you guys define your culture now.
I guess the best way to describe it is if you look at the original 5 guys that were a part of getting this business started, we're not all cut out of the same mold. You know, we didn't all, go to the same college and, get into the same things. We all are unique individuals with different backgrounds from different places on the East Coast. And I think naturally our chemistry kind of grew because of that diversity. And when we started the company, I think people were drawn to the fact that we were all different. And then barbers were drawn to that, and people were drawn to that were interested in the trade. And they said, wow, these guys are awesome. It's not just like, it's not like a hipster barbershop. Like that dude is literally like a jock, or like this dude is like a, whatever.
Yeah.
We're not just a mold. So we started to meet a lot of really interesting people that have creative backgrounds. And I think that was the most important thing to us, is we wanted people that had creativity and passion just kind of flowing through them. And those people naturally drawn to us because that's who we are.
Right.
So we started to meet amazing people like our barber, Chris Curry, who's, hand makes his own clothing, or it's just like we meet the coolest people because of, the vibe that just kind of naturally, like organically grew out of it.
Sure. That's cool. And so you were talking earlier today that so now you guys are full up here, full down in the fan, full here.
Yeah.
All chairs, full 24/7.
Pretty crazy. Actually, we had to open an extra hour every day.
Right.
So now we're open from 8 to 7 every weekday. And then Saturdays we're open until 3 now. So we open at 8 a.m. every single day. We're able to finally now, with the amount of barbers that we have, throw some flex scheduling in there. So some guys work 8 to 5, some guys work 10 to 7.
Right.
But prior to that, everyone was just grinding the whole way through 9 to 7 every day.
Right.
But we've got people that work here that have families, people that have hobbies outside of here. It was really important for us to concern ourselves with the longevity of the career of our barbers. So we said, you know what, let's give everyone the ability to back off a little bit on the hours they're working and get some flex going here. And
Sure.
it's been great.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's really been fun watching the brand evolve and develop. But location 1, location 2 here in Scott's Addition, and are there future locations in the hopper?
Yeah, maybe. That's a question. As soon as we open this one, day 2 is, when's the next one opening?
Right.
When's the third one? And
yeah.
I think everyone would agree that our goal was to get both shops fully operational, all chairs. I mean, maximize the amount of work we can do without killing ourselves. And then really take a look back and take a look at the numbers and say, okay, how are we doing? Does it make sense for us to pursue this in another avenue, in another part of the city, or in another city altogether?
Right.
And that's something that we're going to probably analyze at the end of year 1. Like I said, we just got this shop full in the past basically 60 days. So I think everyone would agree we want to see how this goes throughout the summer and fall,
right,
and get a real picture of what the numbers look like, what our barbers feel like, and if it makes sense for us to, drive down that avenue.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be you guys are approaching, in my opinion, the right way of ambitious, growing, yet a bit careful and deliberate to make sure you guys take one step forward and not a step forward, step back. And so that's great. So we like to close each of these with a just kind of barrage of questions about all things Richmond. So I'll just start firing them at you.
Yeah.
Favorite restaurant in Richmond?
There's so many good restaurants in Richmond.
Yeah. You can name one. You can name a couple if you want.
Okay. Classic go-to if my mom's coming to town is going to be Edo's or Stella's.
Okay.
Love them both. Really excited about Stella's new market in the Handcraft building.
Yeah.
Been going there a lot. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's not a restaurant. Can never deny Cuba Cuba.
Yeah.
And then got to show love to the Roosevelt, Southbound, that whole Laura Lee's.
Yep.
Those are top contenders for me.
Sure. So name a business in Richmond that you have a business crush on. I'm sure a lot of people have a business crush on High Point. Is there a company out there that you just really admire for what they're doing in the Richmond area?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You might not think of this as like their business model is different, but I have like nothing but love for Round 2.
Yeah.
I've watched those kids grow that shop and that business from a storage space to now they've got a location in New York City, in Hollywood, and they're opening one in South Beach next month.
You would tell the viewers what round 2 does?
Yeah. So round 2 started as like a vintage consignment for sneakers and like collectibles and like sportswear and urban wear, streetwear, so to speak. And that just started out of like a passion project with 3 guys that I think they were all VCU students at the time, but they just loved that stuff. And I connect with that because I also love that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, they started down in Jackson Ward, like on Main Street or on Broad Street, and then they've just blown up.
Yeah.
And this year, actually, Sean, one of the owners, won a contest of being a designer of a sneaker, made a Nike Air Max collaboration that he designed himself. That's one of the most popular shoes in the world right now.
Right.
You have to admire that as as someone looking at creative people. That's pretty up there. So that's probably
your local business crush.
Kind of a local. I mean, I guess they're not really local anymore, but definitely a local business crush. But there's plenty of admirable businesses in Richmond that I look up to. No questions asked. CrossFit RVA is my gym. I love that business. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. How about local musical act? Are you still in the music scene at all locally? You have a band or musician that you're a fan of here?
Yeah, actually, I book a music festival here. Okay. I've done it for 12 years.
Which one's that?
It's called United Blood. Okay. It takes place at Canal Club. I bring in we bring in like 35 to 40 bands every year. It's still hardcore, heavy. So I'm still very involved in the music scene in Richmond in that respect. But a local music crush, Down to Nothing, amazing Richmond hardcore band that I've been friends with since I was 17. Still going. Drummer is a ER doctor, has a wife and child, and still tours the world.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay, so last question. So you got a friend who wants to visit Richmond for the first time. They're gonna come on a Friday, leave on a Sunday, and you're gonna show them the city over the weekend. What do you do where do you take that person? What do you show them?
If it's in the summer, we're gonna go to Pipeline first. Okay. We're gonna dive off the rocks into the river there and ride down the rapids. We'll go get coffee at any of the great coffee shops in Richmond, Lamplighter. Probably try to get them to get a Richmond tattoo at Absolute Art.
Sure, yeah.
Or Black Rabbit in the Museum District. What else are we going to do? Probably go to my gym, work out and sweat a little bit, CrossFit RVA.
Yeah.
And I've never been to the rooftop at the Cork Hotel, so maybe I'll take them there.
Sure.
We'll go check out the new museum, the ICA. Yeah. Pretty awesome. I got there the opening weekend. And hopefully they bring a bike and we take a ride on the Capitol Trail.
Cool. And then before they leave on Sunday, any particular brunch spot you're going to hit before you leave town? Before they leave town?
Oh, man. I love Helen's.
Yeah.
Helen's brunch is phenomenal. Best pancakes I've ever had in my life.
Sure. Well, yeah, man. Well, thank you for having me at your shop, man. If you haven't been to High Point, either location, please come check it out. Great barbershop, great vibe, great dude. So thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Duke, thank you.
Yeah, can I get my shave now?
Oh, yeah, time. Yeah, let's go.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.